They gave the family house to the son who never paid a bill, and told the daughter, who kept everything together, to be grateful for a box of old photos. For 20 years, Emily was the dependable one. The one who showed up. The one who answered late-night calls. The one who took Grandma to doctor appointments when everyone else was too busy. But in her family, quiet loyalty did not earn love. It only earned more responsibility. Her brother Jason was the golden child. He got the praise, he got the excuses. And when Grandma died, he expected to get the house too. Their parents smiled like the decision had already been made. Jason even brought a moving truck, but before he could carry one box through the front door, an attorney opened Grandma's will, and one sentence changed everything. But that was not even the real trap, because Grandma had left a second envelope too, one that Jason's smile would not survive. Because Grandma had not forgotten who really loved her, and when the truth came out, the daughter they ignored became the only person with the power to decide what happened next. On Jason's 19th birthday, Emily came home from work with groceries for Grandma Rose in the back seat. Jason had crashed their father's truck 2 days earlier. The house was full of sympathy for him. Linda kept saying he felt terrible. Mark said young men made mistakes. Someone had even bought Jason his favorite cake so the week would not feel so hard. Emily carried the grocery bags through the kitchen door. Her shoes were wet. Her hands were red from the cold. Before she could take off her coat, Linda pointed toward the sink. "Good, you're here. Can you help with the dishes?" Jason looked up from the table and smiled like nothing in the world had ever cost him anything. That was how the Miller house worked. Jason could break something and become the person everyone comforted. Emily could fix something and become the person everyone handed more work to. Jason was loud, charming, careless, and somehow always forgiven. Emily was quiet, responsible, and somehow always expected to do more. When Jason borrowed money, Linda called it a rough season. When Emily asked for one free weekend, Mark asked why she was acting distant. Grandma Rose was the only person who did not pretend it was normal. She never made speeches in front of the family. She did something smaller. She watched. She watched Emily fold laundry after work. She watched Emily cook soup when nobody else came by. She watched Emily fix the porch light while Jason promised to visit and forgot. One night, while Emily was rinsing medicine cups at the kitchen sink, Grandma Rose said, "People get comfortable with the person who never makes them uncomfortable. Be careful with that." Emily gave a tired smile. "I'm fine, Grandma." Rose shook her head. "No, honey. You're useful. That is not the same as fine." Emily carried that sentence for years, because it was the first time anyone had described the shape of her life without asking her to apologize for it. By 32, Emily had a small apartment, a steady job, a used car that rattled every winter, and a phone that rang whenever someone needed a ride, a bill paid, a prescription picked up, or a mess quietly cleaned. But when Emily called home just to talk, her mother rushed her off the phone. Jason, meanwhile, lived like the world owed him softness. He borrowed money, missed holidays, forgot birthdays. But when he walked into a room, their parents lit up. "Jason's here." That sentence always sounded like an event. When Emily arrived, it sounded like a task list, and Emily helped, because that was who she was. The hard part was not helping. The hard part was realizing the family had stopped seeing help as love. They saw it as her job, and Grandma Rose saw exactly what that was doing to her. When Grandma got sick, the family suddenly became very emotional, at least in public. Jason posted old photos online. He wrote captions about family, legacy, and the woman who raised us all. But Emily noticed something. He never actually came by. Not unless there were cousins around. Not unless someone might see him. Emily was there on the quiet days, the hard days, the days with no audience. She changed sheets, made meals, read mail, sat beside Grandma when the house was so quiet the ticking clock sounded too loud. Her parents thanked Jason for calling once a week. They barely thanked Emily for being there every day. Then came the day. Grandma passed. The funeral was small, beautiful, heavy. Emily stood near the back because Jason had taken the front row with their parents. He cried loudly. People hugged him. They told him how hard it must be. Emily stood alone by the guest book, holding herself together. After the service, the family returned to Grandma's house, and that was when Jason started acting like the future had already been signed over to him. He walked through the living room and said, "I think I'll keep the fireplace." Emily looked up. "You'll keep it?" Jason shrugged. Mom and Dad said Grandma always wanted the house to stay with the family. Their mother, Linda, avoided Emily's eyes. Their father, Mark, cleared his throat. Jason has a family name to carry on. Emily almost laughed. Jason was divorced. No children, no steady job. But in that house, logic had never mattered much. Her mother touched Emily's arm and said, "You'll get something too, honey. Something. Like a consolation prize." Jason smiled. "I figured you'd want the photo albums. You were always into sentimental stuff." Emily looked at the walls. The same walls she had washed, painted, decorated for Christmas. The same kitchen where she had cooked for Grandma when nobody else showed up. And for the first time in years, she felt something inside her. Go still, not angry, not yet, just still, because she finally understood. They were not overlooking her by accident. They were choosing to. There was one more moment Emily could not forget. The evening after the funeral, Jason walked through Grandma's house with a measuring tape. He did not ask anyone for permission. He measured the living room wall. He measured the hallway. He even stood in Grandma's bedroom and said the carpet would have to go. Emily stood in the doorway, holding a box of medicine bottles she still needed to throw away. Jason looked at her and said, "You can take the old pictures if you want. I know you like that sad stuff." Linda did not correct him. Mark did not tell him to stop. They both acted like Emily should simply be grateful to receive the pieces nobody else wanted. That was the exact moment Emily stopped hoping they would suddenly become fair. She did not know Grandma's will yet. She did not know the attorney was coming. She only knew that the family had already erased her grief while she was still standing in the room. The attorney arrived the next morning. His name was Mr. Whitaker, a calm man in a gray suit with a leather folder tucked under one arm. Jason greeted him like a winner waiting for a trophy. Their parents sat together on the couch. Emily sat in the chair near the window, the same chair Grandma used to sit in. Nobody asked her how she was doing. Nobody asked if she was ready. Mr. Whitaker opened the folder and said, "Rose Miller left very specific instructions." Jason leaned back, confident. Linda folded her hands. Mark nodded like he already knew what was coming. Then the attorney began. There were small gifts first, jewelry to Linda, tools to Mark, a savings account divided among the grandchildren. Jason smiled through all of it, waiting. Then Mr. Whitaker turned the page. "To my grandson Jason, I leave the sum of $5,000. The room went quiet. Jason blinked. "5,000, Mr. Whitaker continued. "And my written hope that he uses it to become the man his family has spent years pretending he already is." Emily looked down. Her mother whispered, "That can't be right." Jason sat forward. "What about the house?" Mr. Whitaker looked at Emily. Then he read the sentence that cracked the room in half. "To my granddaughter Emily, I leave my home, my land, and the full remaining estate, because she was the one who showed up when love became inconvenient." Nobody moved. The clock ticked. Once, twice. Jason's face changed first. Confusion, then anger, then panic. Linda covered her mouth. Mark stood up. Rose must have been confused. Mr. Whitaker did not flinch. "She was evaluated 2 months before signing. She was fully competent." Jason pointed at Emily. You talked her into this. Emily finally looked at him. Her voice was calm. No, I loved her. And that hurt them more than shouting ever could. Mr. Whitaker was not finished. He reached into the folder again. Not for a letter, not for a dramatic final speech, for records, a care calendar, a list of appointment dates, copies of checks, copies of repair invoices, and a small stack of handwritten notes Rose had kept beside her bills. The first page was simple, a timeline. Emily, Tuesday night, medication pickup. Emily, Thursday morning, doctor visit. Emily, Saturday, groceries and porch light, week after week, month after month. Not emotional, not polished, just impossible to deny. Linda stared at the pages like they had raised their voices at her. Mark shifted in his chair. Jason looked annoyed, then nervous. Mr. Whitaker said, Rose asked that these records be kept with the estate file, in case anyone questioned why she made her decision. Jason laughed once. It came out thin. So what? Emily helped. That doesn't mean she gets a house. Mr. Whitaker turned another page. This one was different. It was not about Emily's help. It was about Jason's emergencies. Years of checks Grandma Rose had written after Jason or his parents came to her with another urgent story. Rent, car repairs, credit card payments, business ideas that never became businesses. Every check had Rose's signature, but beside many of them she had written notes in shaky handwriting. They said Jason needed help again. One note mentioned a truck loan, one mentioned a credit card payment, one simply said, Mark promised this would be the last time, Linda whispered. Rose kept those, Mr. Whitaker answered. Rose kept everything. That was when Emily understood. The house was not Grandma's way of making a speech from beyond the grave. It was not a sentimental trap. It was evidence. Rose had watched the family for years. Then she built a legal wall around the one person everyone else kept handing the mess to. Jason had not been forgotten. He had been protected for too long, and Emily did not have to attack anyone. The paperwork had already done what her family never did. It told the truth. Emily did not answer Jason right away. He kept talking about lawyers, about fairness, about how Grandma Rose would never want the family divided. But Emily looked around the living room, and for the first time, she did not feel like the helper standing in someone else's house. She felt the floor under her own feet. Mr. Whitaker placed the record packet back into the folder. He did not need to say another word. The copies of the checks were there. The care calendar was there. The years of pressure were there. Linda tried to reach for Emily's hand. Honey, we can talk about this. Emily looked at her mother's hand, the same hand that had passed her dishes, bills, keys, medicine bottles, and responsibility for most of her adult life. Then she gently stepped back. Not today, Emily said. Mark looked hurt. Jason looked furious. But Emily felt something strange inside her chest. Not victory, not revenge, space. Grandma Rose had not left her a weapon. She had left her a boundary. In the months that followed, Emily kept the house. She fixed the porch light, repainted the kitchen, moved Grandma's chair near the window. And when Jason asked if he could come by just to talk, Emily did not slam the door. She simply said, "Send it in writing." For once, everything in that family had to be clear. No guilt, no pressure, no quiet daughter carrying a mess she did not make. Just truth and a locked front door. The saddest part of Emily's story is not that her family wanted the house. It is that they never believed she deserved anything unless she was serving them. Grandma Rose did not give Emily a house to start a war. She gave her a door that finally locked from the inside. So now I want to ask you, if you were Emily, would you let Jason back into that house after everything? Or would you protect the peace she spent years earning alone?